We kick off the program with the latest developments in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. At least one person has been killed and several buildings damaged following a Russian missile strike across the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. The head of Kyiv's military administration, Serhiy Popko, said residents in the city center heard loud explosions and fires broke out in several buildings. Ukrainian air defenses were engaged in repelling the missiles in the morning rush hour attack. According to authorities, Russian forces used 8 missiles, including hypersonic Kinzhal missiles and Iskander KN-23 ballistic missiles to carry out the attack. The Russian Defense Ministry said it had struck a command center used by Ukraine's SBU intelligence agency, a site which it said was involved in the designing and construction of missiles and a US-made Patriot anti-aircraft missile system. Well, it was only yesterday that Russian President Vladimir Putin said his country should have invaded Ukraine earlier. In a national address spanning more than 4 hours, Russia began the conflict with its neighbor in February 2022, and at his annual televised end-of-year press conference, Mr. Putin claimed the war has made Russia stronger. The Russian leader also admitted that he wanted to strike somewhere in Kyiv using a new missile and see what happens. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is attending the EU summit in Brussels, gave a determined response to Mr. Putin's hostile comments, saying that the Russian leader is crazy and dangerous for everybody.
For us, it's very important that I think that President Trump is a strong man, and I want very much to have him on our side. For me, it's very important. I want to discuss with him more details about this war. I think it's very important because he was not in this war, because he was not the president. It's understandable. And I want to share with him more details. I think that Putin is not adequate and he's very dangerous for everybody. Dangerous because for him it doesn't matter what it meant to be, I mean, this human life, nothing. And I think he's crazy. I think so. I think he also thinks that he's crazy. No, it's true. He loves to kill. That's very dangerous for everybody.
Now, what are the possible future trajectories of the conflict and what are the implications for Ukraine, Russia and the international community? Joining us to unravel all of this is the international affairs analyst Yinka Oyeniji. He joins us from East Midlands in the United Kingdom. Great to see you again today, Yinka.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Good evening.
So let's get your honest reaction. First, what does Mr. Putin's statement reveal about his mindset and strategy regarding Ukraine, and how can this relate to current events or developments in the conflict?
Well, I don't think it's any different from the conversation we've been having over the last few months. We are getting to the end of the war. And then, of course, if we are going to analyze, if Putin is going to take stock, he's going to ask himself, what has he been able to achieve, okay? And also compare that with the investments and the costs of the war. So here we are, a few weeks to a transition into office, an inauguration of the next president of the United States. It's less than a month away, okay? Today's the 20th. In fact, it's about 4 weeks from today that Mr. Donald Trump is going to become 47th president of the United States. And everybody knows all across the Middle East and the international community that there has to be an end to the wars that we've been having for about 2-3 years across the world. And then, of course, it's even more important because the United States plays a pivotal role. And then, of course, Putin knows that he won't be able to fire any other missile after the 28th of January. So whatever he can do, he will do up until now. But he would realize that he misjudged the reaction from Ukraine. He probably thought it was a quick smash and grab, and that hasn't happened. Zelensky has held his own on behalf of his country up till now, and Putin can't say that there are exactly any gains in this war for him and for Russia.
And how might Mr. Putin's admission that he should have invaded Ukraine earlier be perceived by the Russian public, especially potential implications for his domestic popularity?
Oh, well, I don't even see where Russia itself is going, apart from standing by Putin for a couple more years. Again, there should be a rebound because the whole world is going to get into a state of shock regarding the economy next year. I read somewhere today, just saw the headline that Mr. Donald Trump insisted that to be able to get any tax reliefs or to be able to lower trade tariffs, that you have to buy oil from the United States. Now, if the United States is pumping oil and Saudi and the Gulf is trying to also round up business in supposed transition from oil business, then you see that international trade is going to get emasculated. Now, that said, Trump also, I said Trump, sorry, Mr. Putin also would have to try to raise up the economy in his country for the next 2-3 years. And his people don't have a choice. The opposition is severely decimated. We don't know the whereabouts of the Wagner head anymore. And that's been almost a year ago, if not over a year. Everybody since moved on. So regarding domestic affairs for Mr. Putin, I think he's bought himself at least 2 years minimum to be able to try to wrap up his own presidency as well. And it's not as though there's opposition strong enough in Russia to be able to take him out of office. Remember also that the despot from Syria is there in Russia. All of those come across to be able to buy time for Putin. He definitely will oversee scaling down the war in Russia. He's bought himself time in that regard. He's got to pay. He's got to compensate Ukraine for all he has done, and that will require some time. So I think domestically, I think that Putin will still hold on, and he will stand firm, give it another 2 to 3 years.
And, how might Mr. Putin's, or rather, what message do you think Mr. Putin is trying to convey to the international community through his statement, especially how it can impact global perceptions of Russia's true intentions?
I think that he has scoffed at the international community. It's something that Mr. Donald Trump has done in the past. And just before I came on the program now, I started to reflect. What do we learn from this war and these wars that have been happening, okay, in the last 2 to 3 years? Number one, NATO's influence has severely waned, whereas NATO still has some kind of assets in time regarding military warfare. The countries by themselves face economic crisis as a result of this war. I'm talking about Germany, I'm talking about the United Kingdom, I'm talking about France. So if you look at all the arrowheads of NATO, they've got problems locally, especially regarding their respective economies, all right? Which is why the United States incoming president would just say, we've got to put America first, okay? It's all about America, make America great again. He has absolutely no interest in continuing to be in the Santa Claus for the rest of the world, or the big brother for the rest of the world. So as it is, we learn a hard lesson, which had already been there for quite a while, okay? Even the United Nations have been funded singularly by the United States government up until now. And also, you find that all the sanctions that have been meted out, they are unable to enforce. Israel is going anywhere, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. That tells us that there has to be a reordering of the Committee of Nations. And it's about security, it's about the firm economy, it's about how strong that you are politically, locally, to be able to determine the course for your presidency all over the nation. So as it is right now, we need to do something about NATO, about the United Nations to consider. I do not think that the United Nations or NATO may be able to bring back their strength as soon as possible. But I think that countries like the United States and, of course, Israel will be able to determine the cause of international agencies. So what Putin has done is to scoff at them, to say what we already knew, that they probably had resources, but they had absolutely no influence when it came to going to war. And then we see China, North Korea, and Russia standing side by side. And you need to watch out, especially because they are building economies to back up what is to come, which is the BRICS. So within the next 2-3 years, we may not be able to recognize international agencies that we know today. And I'm saying that they will face even more severe depletion in terms of influence. I'm talking about the United Nations and NATO.
With your late analysis on this and, what you're seeing, do you envisage like new Russian military strategy and performance in the Russian camp?
There's absolutely no way that is not going to happen. I mean, all Putin needed to do was to be able to stand firm till now. China will join in the fray. And so one thing we can take home with us is that for the next 3-4 years, at least throughout the presidency of Donald Trump, you can be sure that China is not going to make any attempt at invading Taiwan. That's not going to happen. However, post-Trump government, what is going to happen? That's what the whole world should be prepared for. You already see that Trump says that BRICS can go ahead to put up a currency and reinforce a currency that will drive the dollar. That is what we should start to look at. Where is Africa in this whole thing if we have to make a choice? Will Nigeria, for example, continue to be a non-aligned nation in the circumstances? We are not member of BRICS fully, so to speak. And then, of course, the trade war between China and the United States will continue. So as it is, it's a new world order. It would favor Russia at some point because it will be able to rely on a strong economy like China that's making advancements in innovation. North Korea is still building its nuclear armaments. So give them another 5 years. We're going to see a reordering of influence in the international community.
Right. And what do you think, was playing out in the mind of the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, when he was addressing that meeting in Brussels? The names he was calling the Russian president. And, what do you think was going through his mind at that particular point in time?
I think that is very much lived up to his bidding. I won't say that he's outweighed his value. And I'm talking about Zelensky himself, because he's been able to help his country to stand up against an international bully like Russia. However, there's absolutely nothing else for him to do in this matter. There's absolutely nothing going for him as it is in this matter. Everybody has to come to the table to negotiate, and he's already considering that. So he knows, Putin says the truth to say that they should have attacked him. But I don't even think that is true, because Putin didn't just wake up to invade Ukraine. He annexed Crimea since 2014. So he had this planned all along. The only thing is that what he didn't envisage was that there won't be so much resistance as we have at this time, because economies are crashing. France, they are faced, Germany, all of those people who stood up for Ukraine, they can't really withstand it anymore. The economies are suffering shocks. So he could say, and I think that it was half-handed, it wasn't a statement he thought through, but it's the truth. He could have attacked Ukraine earlier if he knew that the opposition, it took almost two going on 3 years for Ukraine to start to fire at Russia at all. Ukraine kept defending up until August this year. That is something that Russia itself wouldn't have envisaged. All right. But look at what is happening. Iran also, those that could have stood up in the camps for Russia are unable to do anything. The good thing for Putin himself is that he got to the ending, to the last days of the war, before he was able to establish that he probably even overrated Ukraine in the first place. Kudos to Zelensky himself that it didn't go down immediately, but it still doesn't mean that Russia is getting enough. So if he had attacked earlier, knowing that Zelensky wasn't able to repel the attacks much more than he has done, he probably would have gotten more gains. How many cities has he been able to get? But he's wasted manpower. So many lives have been lost from Russia, from North Korea itself. So in reflection now, Putin would think he's not really getting any, it's not winner here. I can't see a winner here as it is. So it's something that he could have done earlier. He could have done in the beginning of the administration, possibly the first time that Biden became president. But everybody just went away thinking United States, regardless of whoever the president is, United States will fight back. But United States didn't even have the capacity to be able to support Ukraine or Zelensky. And the same thing for the rest of the NATO countries. We are all severely decimated, the EU and the NATO countries. And we have to focus back on our individual countries to be able to build again. Unfortunately, we are building even when it's more difficult. You'll see that even United Kingdom, both the government in power and the opposition are trying to curry favor of a president who is yet to be inaugurated. So it's time to buckle up in the International Committee of Nations. And of course, like I said, it doesn't appear as if Russia has won this war.
Right. So thank you so much, international affairs analyst Yinka Oyiniji.
Thank you very much for having me.
The European Union says it will deliver additional 30 billion euros of financial support to Ukraine in 2025. This is looking to the future now. President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, says the bloc has already delivered about 130 billion euros of financial support to Ukraine since the war started in 2022. Meanwhile, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, reiterates that the EU is committed to ensuring that Ukraine has all the support it needs to its accession to the bloc.
Will implement the 15 sanctions package against Russia we approved this week. This package closes loopholes and limits circumvention and especially targets the so-called shadow fleet. Second, we have already delivered about 130 billion euros of financial support, and we will deliver an additional 30 billion euro in 2025.
And in parallel, we continue to accompany Ukraine on its path of accession to our Union. If Ukraine keeps up the good work, we should be ready to open the first cluster of accession negotiations early next year. Some others could follow during that year as well.
Meanwhile, the head of Estonian Foreign Intelligence, Kaupo Rosin, has been commenting on the overall security situation in the region, calling it worrisome. He says NATO will need to contain Russia for the next 20 years as Moscow's agenda is to drive the US out of Europe and to reshape the European security.
Well, the situation has not gotten better. The overall security situation in the region in Europe, I think it is not the Baltics, it's actually the Europe as such. The security situation is much more worrisome than it was before the large-scale invasion. We also understand that Russian broader idea is to drive US out of Europe and to reshape the European security architecture. These are the goals, and we understand it. And let's say they are constantly pushing towards that at any cost, as it seems at the moment. Russians would like to make Ukraine a crumbled state, a crippled state. And again, here I see that the Russians would also like to negotiate this broader safety and security of Russian borders, which is not only Ukraine then, but it is also the NATO eastern flank, trying to limit then the NATO activities, NATO infrastructure, NATO troop presence in the vicinity of Russia. So this is probably the Russian agenda with what they will show up, if they show up in negotiations. Russians are usually ready to negotiate if they perceive strength on the opposing side. Russia usually do not negotiate with weak opponents. They dictate to the weak opponents. So our plans must be credible, must be real, and must be backed up with real resource in regarding troops present or follow-on units. This must be backed up with proper resource regarding ammunition, for example. The follow-on forces, or let's say support forces, must be selected, designated. They must exercise in the potential future operation areas. So this all comes as one package. If we do our homework properly, then we will be able to deter Russia. And in my view, in NATO in the coming 10, 20 years, the main task will be to contain or deter Russia so it doesn't get any stupid ideas to push towards the West militarily.
Well, in another development, in Moscow court has charged the suspect accused of killing Russian General Igor Kirillov with terrorism resulting in the death of a person. The court ordered that the suspect, identified as Akhmajon Korbanov, is to be sent to pre-trial detention for a period of 2 months. Earlier this week, Russia said it had detained an Uzbek man who had confessed to planting and detonating a bomb in Moscow, which killed Mr. Kirillov, who served as the chief of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical protection troops.